The medical bay smelled of synthetic air and metal when Lieutenant Rebecca Moore first saw the alien woman strapped to the examination table. The creature was dying, and everyone on the station knew it. Her name was Zyphira, according to the translation, Matrix, and she belonged to the Vareth species, a race that had conquered 40 systems before humans even learned to make fire. Now she lay broken on a human medical station, her silver skin turning dull gray, and her forearms trembling with each labored breath. Rebecca stood at the doorway holding a datapad that suddenly felt too heavy in her hands. She was just a junior medical officer fresh out of academy training and completely unprepared for what the senior staff had just told her. The Vareth woman was refusing all treatment, not because humans lacked the technology, but because she had given up, according to every scan and every test her body could heal. But her mind had already accepted death. Commander Patricia Walsh appeared beside Rebecca with tired eyes and lines of stress across her forehead. The older woman had spent 3 days trying to convince their patient to fight for survival, and failed every single time. "We need someone new," Patricia said quietly. "Someone she hasn't already rejected." Rebecca felt her stomach twist into knots. The Vareth were legendary warriors who viewed humans as soft weaklings barely worth acknowledging as a spacefaring species. Their empire had fought a brutal war against the Khazrin Alliance just 2 years ago, and won decisively with tactics so ruthless that even hardened military strategists felt uncomfortable discussing them. "What makes you think she'll listen to me?" Rebecca asked. Patricia shrugged with a gesture that looked more defeated than hopeful. "Maybe she won't, but you're all we have left, and if she dies here it becomes a diplomatic incident that could destabilize the entire sector." Rebecca took a deep breath and stepped into the medical bay. The doors hissed shut behind her, leaving her alone with the dying warrior. Up close, Zyphira looked even more otherworldly. Her face had angular features that seemed carved from stone, and her eyes were solid black without any visible pupil or iris. Those eyes tracked Rebecca as she approached the examination table with an intensity that made her want to turn and run. "You are new," Zyphira said in a voice like gravel scraping against metal. The translation device embedded in Rebecca's uniform collar converted the alien language instantly, but somehow kept the cold, dismissive tone perfectly intact. Rebecca nodded and forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I'm Lieutenant Rebecca Moore, and I wanted to talk with you." The Vareth woman made a sound that might have been a laugh or a snarl. "Talk is what your kind does best when action is required." Her words stung, but Rebecca pushed down her defensiveness. "You're injured badly, and our medical team can help you heal, but only if you let them." Zyphira's expression didn't change. "Why would I accept help from humans? Your species barely survived first contact with the Zorvath pirates, and you call that military readiness?" Rebecca felt anger flare in her chest. "We survived and we learned, and now we're here offering to save your life. Is that not worth something?" The alien woman's forearm shifted slightly, testing the restraints that held her in place. "I was third commander of the assault fleet that broke the Khazrin defensive line at Sector 9. I led 40,000 warriors into battle and watched half of them burn in the void. Now I am broken and useless, discarded by my own people because I failed to die with honor." Her voice cracked on the last word, revealing a depth of pain that transcended species barriers. Rebecca pulled up a chair and sat down beside the examination table. "Tell me what happened." Zyphira turned her head away. "Why do you care? Because you're dying in my medical bay, and I don't want that to happen." For a long moment, silence filled the space between them. Then slowly, haltingly, Zyphira began to speak. The battle had been a trap. Intelligence report suggested the Khazrin forces were retreating, but instead they had laid an ambush using gravity mines that tore through shields like paper. Zyphira's flagship was destroyed in the first volley, and she barely escaped in an evacuation pod. When rescue arrived 3 days later, she learned that the entire operation had been deemed a failure. In Vareth culture, military defeat without death was considered shameful, rather than face execution or exile. Zyphira had stolen a small transport and fled into neutral space. She crashed on an asteroid near this station, and humans found her in the wreckage. "Your people didn't abandon you because you failed," Rebecca said carefully. "They abandoned you because they're afraid of what failure means." Zafira looked at her with those solid black eyes. What would you know of honor? Rebecca met her gaze steadily. I know that honor isn't about dying, it's about choosing to keep going even when everything tells you to give up. The alien woman was quiet for several heartbeats. Your species lost 60% of your colony ships in the first expansion wave. You had no defensive technology, no allies, and every aggressive race in the sector saw you as easy. Pray yet you adapted and survived, and now you sit on the Galactic Council as voting members. She paused, and something shifted in her expression. That is not weakness. Rebecca felt surprise ripple through her. You studied human history. Zafira made that ambiguous sound again. Know your enemy is a principle older than starlight. But you are not my enemy, are you? No, Rebecca said firmly. We are not. Over the following days, Rebecca visited Zafira regularly. At first, the conversations were brief and awkward, but gradually the Vareth woman began to open up. She spoke of her homeworld with its red skies and crystal mountains. She described the warrior academies, where she trained from childhood learning combat strategy and weapons mastery. She talked about her bonded partner who died in a previous campaign, and the daughter she left behind when she fled. Rebecca listened and shared her own stories in return. She told Zafira about growing up on Earth in a small town where everyone knew everyone. She described her decision to join the Space Medical Corps despite her family's concerns. She explained how she still felt inadequate. Sometimes, surrounded by officers with decades more experience, slowly, carefully trust began to form between them. On the 8th day, Zafira finally agreed to begin treatment. The medical team worked carefully repairing damaged tissue and regenerating her injured organs. Rebecca stayed with her through every procedure, holding one of her 4 hands. When the pain became too intense, the physical healing progressed well, but the emotional wounds remained. One evening, Rebecca found Zafira staring out the observation window at the stars beyond. What will you do now? Rebecca asked gently. The Vareth woman didn't turn around. I cannot return home, and I have no place among other species. I am a warrior without a war. Rebecca stood beside her at the window. Then maybe it's time to find a new purpose. Zafira finally looked at her. What purpose could a disgraced Vareth commander possibly serve? Rebecca smiled slightly. Our station needs security advisors, and your tactical experience would be invaluable. It's not leading fleets into battle, but it is protecting people, and that matters. The alien woman's expression was unreadable. You would trust me with such responsibility after everything I told you. Yes, Rebecca said, simply because I believe people deserve second chances. Zafira's 4 hands clenched and unclenched as she processed this. Your species confuses me. You are weak by our standards, yet you show strength in ways we never considered. You value life over glory and compassion over conquest. How did you survive long enough to reach the stars? Rebecca thought about that question carefully. Maybe we survived because we were willing to help each other instead of fighting alone. And maybe that's not weakness, but a different kind of strength. The Vareth woman turned fully to face her. You saved my life, Rebecca Moore. When my own people would have let me die. That creates a debt of honor. Rebecca shook her head. You don't owe me anything. Zafira reached out with one hand and placed it carefully on Rebecca's shoulder. Among my people, such a debt is binding. I am yours until it is repaid. The words carried weight that transcended their literal meaning. Rebecca felt something shift in the air between them, understanding, acceptance, and perhaps the beginning of something deeper. Then stay, Rebecca said quietly. Stay because you want to, not because you owe me. Fira's hand remained on her shoulder. Perhaps both reasons can be true. 3 months later, Zafira stood in the security office reviewing patrol schedules and threat assessments. She had accepted the position of tactical advisor and thrown herself into the work with the same intensity she once brought to military campaigns. The station was safer for her presence, and the crew had grown to respect her expertise. Rebecca stopped by the office during her shift break with 2 cups of coffee. She had learned that Vareth could metabolize caffeine, and Zafira had developed a taste for the bitter human beverage. They stood together looking out at the docking bay where ships came and went in endless cycles. Do you ever regret it? Rebecca asked. Not returning home, Cyphera was quiet for a moment, sometimes, but then I remember that home was a place that valued my death more than my life. Here I have found something different. What have you found? The Varith woman looked at her with those solid black eyes that no longer seemed quite so alien, purpose friendship, and perhaps the beginning of understanding that strength comes in many forms. Rebecca smiled and their hands brushed together in a gesture that felt natural, despite the differences between their species. In the vastness of space, two beings from completely different worlds had found common ground. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture or a dramatic declaration. It was simply two people choosing to stand together in the quiet.